Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, horror, I'm going to talk to you about the 10 best horror books I read in 2022. So I'm going to do 3 of these end of the year kind of videos. So you're going to get top 10 horror today. I'm also going to do top 10 crime and top 10 that kind of thing, which will be other genres. And yeah, I thought it was, as we approach the end of the year, lots of people seem to be doing this kind of thing. And I thought it would be fun to talk about some of my favourite reads of the year. So today we have horror ranked from 10th most enjoyed to first most enjoyed. Most enjoyed, indeed. So yeah, from 10 down to 1, a variety of different things in here. And what I would say is, by no means did all of these books get 5 stars on Goodreads. Indeed, some of them, I think there are some horror books that I did give 5 stars to that aren't in this list. But when I was looking back at the year, these are the ones that kind of leapt out to me as books I just had a really good time with and would happily read again. Rather than necessarily being, excellent, great books that will stand the test of time. And indeed, the first 2 books, certainly, of this series, or in this list, will be proof of that. So anyway, let me start. So book number 10 is The Cellar by Richard Laymon. So this was a reread for me. I've read The Cellar at least once before, if not more than that. As people who follow the channel for a while will know, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Richard Laymon. Sometimes I really enjoy his books. Sometimes I really hate them. And I sometimes think that, I think he's quite a patchy writer anyway. So his books are quite variable. But I also think it very much depends on my own mood when I read the book. But I was definitely in the mood for The Cellar when I read it. So it is a very over-the-top, very explicit, very strange and at times quite amusingly bad horror novel about a house that that is referred to as the Beast House, where various people have died over the years, and a group of people going into that house to try and discover what's going on with it. So yeah, full of sex and violence, very over the top. It gets more and more crazy the further it goes, and the ending is just off the wall. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. It was a very enjoyable, trashy kind of horror read. In a similar vein, number 9, so this is one of the ones that's technically more than one book. So this is the Omen series. So I read all 5 of the books in the Omen series back to back earlier in the year. So these are a series of books inspired by the Omen movies, clearly. So the first 3 are straight novelisations of the film. So The Omen, Damien Omen 2 and Omen 3, The Final Conflict. And indeed, the novelisation of The Omen, when it came out, was a huge seller. Sold really, really well. And clearly the publishers decided to keep on milking the success of the series after they'd finished making movies, and so they churned out another couple of books. And taken as a whole, so I read these back to back, and it was really entertaining. They are trashy. They definitely vary in quality, and the first one is definitely the best written in terms of the quality of the writing and things like that. But yeah, it's a fun, cheesy 80s ride, basically. So yeah, I had a lot of fun reading it. Book 8 is also something slightly cheesy, but I think much classier as well. And that is Thor by Wayne Smith, which is a book I really, really enjoyed. So it was a book I've been aware of for years, but hadn't read. And I read it for a kind of group read this year, and it's fantastic. So it's about a dog called Thor, who lives with a family, and the uncle, so the mother's brother, comes to live with them, and Thor realises early on that there's something off about him, there's something different about him, and he becomes a threat to the family. And it's about Thor trying to manage that threat, but struggling against there's a struggle within it between his instincts to protect the family and the rules that the family lay down in terms of how you should interact with other humans. A lot of the book is told from Thor's perspective, and Wayne Smith does a fantastic job of making him a believable character. So I had an enormous amount of fun with this book. It's really satisfying. It's really exciting. It's really sweet as well. If you're a dog lover or indeed an animal lover, I think you'll really enjoy it. It's got something extra that made it a particularly enjoyable read. Next up, we have, so this is in the number 7 position, we have Halloween Slaughter by Sergio Gomez, the second of his Slaughter series of books. The first one is Camp Slaughter, so these are slasher books, but just really, really well done. So there aren't any great surprises in Halloween Slaughter, but it's such a fun ride. He does a great job of kind of pulling in all the tropes from slasher movies, particularly kind of 80s slasher movies, and turning them into a thoroughly entertaining novel. It's got a fantastic kind of slasher villain called Varias Caras, who is this huge hulking guy who wears a mask made from people's faces and dispatches his victims in incredibly gruesome ways. But Sergio Gomez does a great job both of building his character, but also the characters that surround him within the story. So you do feel sympathy for them as they go through the ordeal that they go through. So yeah, really entertaining slasher book if you like that kind of thing. At number 6, a classic, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So this was a reread for me, but it's just such a great book. Such a fantastic book about kind of the limits we need to put on our aspirations. Just incredibly deep and thoughtful and thought-provoking, but moving as well. Frankenstein, the crazed scientist, is a really interesting character, but the creature, the being he creates, I think is an even more interesting character, and the interplay between them is just fantastic. So yeah, a genuine horror classic, and an absolutely fantastic book. At number 5, a book inspired by one of the classics. This was The Dream Quest of Vellitt Beau by Kits Johnson. So this is kind of her response to The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath by H.P. Lovecraft, which is one of his kind of more fantasy-leaning books. So I think you will get more out of The Dream Quest of Vellitt Beau if you've read the Lovecraft, but it does work on its own as well. So it's a novella, really interesting. So the kind of setup is there's 2 worlds. There's a human world and there's the dream world, and this is about someone from the dream world, whereas the Lovecraft is about someone from the human world going to the dream world. This is kind of the opposite. But this character, Vellitt Beau, going on a quest to find a missing student of hers, and just wonderfully imaginative and rich, draws on its influences really well, and has a fantastic ending as well. I really, really enjoyed it enormously. Ahead of that, we have the other book in this list, which is technically more than one book, and that is Blackwater by Michael McDowell. So this was originally published as 6 books over the course of 6 months, so 6 short novels in a kind of serial form. Absolutely fantastic. So a really rich and interesting Southern Gothic about this wealthy family in the southern states of the US who are they kind of run a logging business, but kind of dominate the small town that they live in through their wealth. But weaves in kind of a lot of horror elements along with the kind of family melodrama. Wonderful cast of characters. It takes place over a few decades, so it's got that kind of really rich family saga kind of a feel, but some brilliant horror in there as well, and just fantastic. I can't speak highly enough of this book. I really, really enjoyed it. Ahead of that, we have a short story by H.P. Lovecraft, who has been mentioned already. So this is The Colour Out of Space, his classic story about a strange meteorite that lands in a farmer's field, and the impact of that on the farmer and his family. So bizarrely imaginative, and Lovecraft does a fantastic job with this one in being brief. He doesn't go on too much about anything. He gives you just enough for it to feel really uncanny and weird and unsettling, but not too much that it strays into the realm of the ridiculous, as can happen with horror. So yeah, it's not a long story, but just a master at work, and he does it fantastically. Slightly ahead of that, so number 2, we have a book I've only read very recently, A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. So I just thought this was a fantastic modern horror novel, and it does feel really modern. So set just after the financial crash of 2008, and really drawing on the impact of that on American society, but the story of a family whose daughter is apparently possessed by some sort of demon, and then getting involved with a reality TV show that comes in to kind of film what's going on with the family. So the impact of that on the family, the impact of the apparent possession on the family, the impact of the state of the economy on the family. Really well-drawn characters, so a small cast of really well-drawn characters, and Paul Tremblay does a great job of just playing out all the different ideas, and also of pulling in loads of influences from other horror stories and movies and things like that, and weaving them together into something that's really satisfying. So I think when people are too upfront about their influences, it can feel a bit annoying almost sometimes, but Paul Tremblay does a brilliant job of it. It really handles it well, and the book was just a delight to read. At number 1 then, we have The Terror by Dan Simmons. So I've read 2 excellent Dan Simmons books this year, this one and Drood, which is his book about Charles Dickens and Wilkie Collins. I almost could have put either. I certainly could have put either in the top 10. I think if I'd included Drew, it probably would have been 2 or 3 in the list rather than 1. But I didn't want to have 2 Dan Simmons books. So The Terror is fantastic. So the story of, based on a true story, of an expedition to the polar regions to try and find a kind of safe passage through them. And the ships, the 2 ships called the Erebus and the Terror, getting stuck in the ice, and the men having to live on these ships for months at a time. But there also being weird supernatural goings on. A big book, it's like 800 pages, something like that. But so rich, so detailed, but never in a way that overwhelms the story. Genuinely scary at times, very thought-provoking, and a fantastic central character. So the central character in this book, who you almost don't realise he's a central character, because there are so many characters in this book, all really well done, and one of them, and I won't say who it is because I don't want to spoil it, but one of them kind of rises up and becomes the central character as the book progresses. He's just fantastically well written. So I really am really getting into Dan Simmons and definitely keen to read more, and indeed more Tremblay. So Head Full of Ghosts was my first Paul Tremblay book. I have read Dan Simmons before, many years ago, but yeah, really enjoying getting into him again, and The Terror is an absolutely brilliant book. Okay, time for a random book from the shelves. This is a horror novel which I haven't read, but which has been on my shelves for a very long time, Horns by Joe Hill. So I'm conscious I do need to get to this at some point. I've read a couple of Joe Hill books. So I've read Nosferatu and The Fireman, both of which I thought were pretty good. I preferred Nosferatu. The Fireman, I wasn't too sure about the ending. But yeah, Horns seems to be one that people like. So yeah, I definitely need to read this soon. So I hope you found that interesting. Let me know what great horror books you've read this year. Let me know if you've read any of the ones I've talked about. Some of them are very well known, so I'm sure many people out there will have. But yeah, let me know what you thought of them. Let me know your best horror reads of the year. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.